Welcome to Lambeau episode 3. This week we talk about Rodgers and the Jets moving on, upcoming quarterback changes in the league, Kellen Moore being hired as the new Saints head coach, and Travis Kelce's future in the league. Our main story this week, obviously, and has been talked about significantly throughout the league in the past couple of weeks, is Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets officially parting ways. It had been rumored for a couple of weeks, but it is now officially official that Rodgers will be traded to another team or retire likely. So, the New York Jets announced that they'll be parting ways with him after 2 disappointing seasons, only about one of which he played due to missing the entirety of the 2023 season, essentially, only making 4 snaps there and getting hit with a season-ending Achilles injury. In 2024, Rodgers' only full season with the team due to the aforementioned Achilles injury. The Jets ended 5-12 record after the Week 6 firing of head coach Robert Saleh. After that, the defense really never improved. So really struggled to gain that consistency. Although the Jets struggled throughout the season, Rodgers wasn't all that bad, even though you might hear a lot about how he was bad, but I would say that he was actually pretty decent for, his age, and, he's actually one of the top Jets quarterbacks in a while, so he performed pretty close to his career average, completing 63% of all pass attempts for 3,897 yards and 28 touchdowns compared to 11 interception. I mean, also just impressive if you consider the fact that he's 41 years old. Got to give him some credit for that. I mean, obviously, there are some weeks where stats were a little bit down. There's a couple 53% completion rates and only 185 yards and a couple interceptions. I mean, especially is the Buffalo game where there was 2 interceptions. Where they lost 14-40, and he only got 112 yards. But that's a pretty difficult team to go up against. Just kind of lopsided matchup there. So according to NFL.com, there's a couple places where Rodgers might end up. The top of the list, according to NFL.com, being the Raiders. Simply because the part ownership of the Raiders by Tom Brady apparently holds a great deal of influence over the organization, trying to build that culture, that winning culture. And that's especially notable now that they've picked up Pete Carroll, who's well known for creating a dominant program in Seattle for 12 years or so. They also have had quarterback troubles in the past couple seasons, so it's possible that they may wish to draft a veteran quarterback as in terms of, a bridge to, a rookie for, the next season, or, get a rookie now and then have him sit and develop under Rodgers like Love did with the Packers and how Brett Favre developed Rodgers, etc. So that would be interesting. And also, Devontae Adams did play for the Raiders, so it is possible that, they could both go back there again. Depends. Even though there has been some speculation that Rodgers wants something on the West Coast, but remains to be seen. According to NFL.com again, New York Giants are at number 2 on the list. Just because they don't have an outstanding starting quarterback, Tommy DeVito being the only returning quarterback for the team. Giants, like the Raiders, aren't in the top 5 draft picks, so if they wanted to get a higher pick and draft a rookie quarterback who they think is really good, that might be more difficult. So they might want to wait a couple years or a year or so with Rodgers. I could see them drafting him, and he wouldn't have to go far since they both play in MetLife Stadium. So that'd be a pretty simple commute then. Cleveland Browns also another option. They don't have a top 5 picking position. They do have a top 5 picking position, actually. Sorry, misspoke there. The Browns do have a top 5 pick position, so they could get a high quality candidate from the draft. So therefore, they draft somebody high up in the quarterback rankings, and then in the rookie quarterback rankings in the draft, they grab him, and Rodgers is either a second string or they start him, and they have the rookie guy they just drafted behind him, developing for a couple years. But who knows? NFL.com seemed to think that he would be a backup, which I don't really see happening. He probably wants to play as a starter for the team. And then the last choice, Pittsburgh Steelers. This one has been rumored, but who knows? Steelers are kind of still looking for that quarterback that they know is gonna stay for a while. So, um, either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. But that means that they could have a second spot open, so they're going to pick one of Fields or Wilson, and therefore there could be a second spot open. Who knows? It's kind of all up in the air there. And then upcoming quarterback changes, not just Rodgers, even though that was kind of the big story. Stafford is likely gonna stay in LA, according to NFL.com again. He wants to play next season, but he would have to take a pay cut of $13 million, and so he'd be playing for $27 million instead of $40 million. So it's a little less, but I mean, quarterbacks do often take, as they get older, they do take a pay cut. I mean, personally, I'd imagine he stays in LA and probably just negotiates for a couple more million on that salary. Probably will reduce a little, but won't do that much unless he wants to follow a player from LA, to some other team. And then probably, one of the more confusing ones and annoying if you're a Falcons fan is the Kirk Cousins trade. I mean, obviously you got traded and then you drafted a first round in the previous draft, so he's going to remain as backup. But it's possible that he gets traded to somebody if Atlanta decide, there isn't a value in this for us, so let's just, make some cash or get some draft capital. Again, we had already kind of brushed over the Steelers and Wilson or Fields thing. So, I mean, Fields was benched after October, so I could imagine the Steelers just saying, well, this guy might be good, or they could just keep him on for this year as a backup and say, or just as a starter, do whatever, rotate him in. So like they could say, he was benched. They could say, hey, well, let's try this again, or whatever. But Pittsburgh anyway is gonna need a long-term starting quarterback because this situation of just kind of flipping people is strange and not working so well. Especially since you're swapping your quarterback out basically. So I could imagine them trying to get a rookie in the draft somewhere, trying to trade up, something like that. And then in terms of the Vikings, that one is also extremely confusing. Kind of a complicated situation. Not so much confusing as, just complicated, lots of moving parts. So Darnold could obviously leave to another team. He had a pretty good season. I mean, he was with the Jets. He was with a lot of teams that he didn't do so well on. But this season, he really kind of seemed like he did very well. But who knows? He could go wherever, basically. So I mean, he could go to another team if the Vikings decide, hey, we're going with J.J. McCarthy. But to me, I think it would make a lot more sense to have Darnold stay and see if he's willing to be a backup. But I don't think he might not be willing to anymore, since he did pretty well in that season and there's teams looking for a quarterback. So he could go to the Giants or something. But you do have Daniel Jones as a backup, so it's possible that they might have J.J. McCarthy as your starter and then have Daniel Jones as a backup, which doesn't seem that bad. I mean, he didn't do so great with the Giants, but, he's a backup, so as long as, McCarthy doesn't get injured again, it's fine. And that's your main issue. All right, and one of the second to last story of the week, we have Kellen Moore getting hired as the Saints offensive coordinator, just off of his dominant Super Bowl performance with the Eagles. Moore previously played, obviously, as a backup from 2012 to 2017 with the Lions and Cowboys as quarterback. I mean, there's not much news other than he got hired, and the Saints just seemed happy with it. It was predicted for a couple months now that, when the Eagles season was over, they'd hired Kellen Moore. Saints organization stated throughout the search process, it became clear that Kellen is the right person to help us reestablish a winning program and culture that our fans are accustomed to and have come to expect. It's worth noting that Moore won't really have to go very far. Since he won the Super Bowl, I'm not sure if he even flew back to Philadelphia. Since he gets to coach in the same stadium he just won the Super Bowl in. And it's now believed that there's a rumor floating around about Travis Kelce, to be more specific, and his status going into next season. It's been rumored that he might retire during this offseason, just because he looked not so great in the Super Bowl. Just didn't really do that well. Looked tired, looked kind of old, but you never know. So he was drafted in 2013, so 11 years ago. So it's a long career. So a couple of his stats: 175 games played, 77 touchdowns, 1,400 targets versus 1,004 receptions, 12,151 career yards, and 12.1 yards per run. As you can see, Kelce's average yards per run has always been above 12.9, or 12, rather, from 2014 to 2022. It was always above 12. But ever since 2023, 2024, there's been a pretty significant drop-off there. So 2023, it went 10.6 yards, and then it went to 8.5. That could be due to aging, or that could also be due to just the fact that their schedule changes. But I mean, it's telling in a way, since they won the Super Bowl in 2022. They won it in 2023, and there was a drop off there too. So and none of the other seasons, and they went to the Super Bowl in 2019. So they faced a lot of good defenses. So I don't think it's based off that. I think it's just he's getting older, maybe. Who knows? It might be that his abilities are starting to decline with it, with age. And I mean, it was noted by a lot of people watching the Super Bowl saying, hey, he doesn't really look like himself. He looks kind of old. He looks kind of tired. I mean, either way, the Chiefs got to make sure that, now all these guys are aging. You got to make sure you got a solid tight end lineup. You just can't, can't count on Kelsey for the next 5 years, which I'm assuming they weren't planning on doing anyway, but it's important to note. And that about wraps it up for this week's episode of LambeauCast. See you next week.